Hey guys, so last time we talked about um, the relationship between westerns in America in the mid-century 1900s compared to Japanese period films. And at the end of part one, I started to talk about the relationship between character archetypes in the two genres, and I kind of wanted to wrap up with that. I didn't have the opportunity to last time, so this video isn't going to be, half an hour long. But I just wanted to talk about some Japanese films that influenced westerns, and just talk about the characters and how they can be easily translated from one genre to the other, and how you might not think about it surface level. How could a western be based on a Japanese film? They seem so different surface level. But it's really more about the way stories are and the way the characters are, and how those aspects of any type of film can be translated through cultures, because we're all people living lives and everything. And first, I just wanted to go through just a couple instances of when westerns were directly influenced by a Japanese film or director. And the two instances I have right now, I actually have. So let me pull those real quick. So, a lot of different films have been influenced by Japanese cinema. One big example is Star Wars. George Lucas talks about how Akira Kurosawa's film The Hidden Fortress was a big influence on A New Hope, which I'm not going to go too much into that because Star Wars isn't a Western, and it's not really related to the conversation we're having today, or that we had last time. But the two movies that I do have that I want to talk about are Akira Kurosawa films, who is one of the most prolific Japanese directors, not even just with Jitageki period dramas, but a plethora of films that spans contemporary genres and many other genres. The first movie, which a lot of people probably know, or if they know anything about Japanese cinema, even just an inkling, they've heard of Seven Samurai. It is a 1954 film directed by Kurosawa, and it is a heavy influence on a lot of cinema, not just westerns. But a lot of directors cite Kurosawa, and especially Seven Samurai, as an inspiration because of its scope, because of its story, because of its characters, and how it can be translated. And one instance of this, where it was essentially remade, was the film by John Sturges in 1960 called The Magnificent Seven, which is a Western of, the similarities are very strong. It's a group building, a team building movie, essentially, where in Seven Samurai, it's this team building where these villagers who are being pestered by these bandits go out of their way to try and find some security. So they go into this major town and they start recruiting these samurai to help them fend off these bandits, to save their crops and to save their lives. And I haven't seen Magnificent Seven, so I can't specifically talk about the plot directly. But from what I know that it's been translated, it's kind of that same dynamic of these the seven cowboys in the Western instance are defending this town. And the reason why you can take the Japanese version and translate it into, an American setting, or I read that there's also a sci-fi film which is kind of a take or a remake or an homage to Seven Samurai, is that the basic principles of the film are easy to translate. The setting can change, the characters, the names can change, and those sort of things can change, but the dynamics are the same. There's this the victim who is, in search of security, and the way that they go about that is by recruiting this ragtag group of people. You can span that, you can put any sort of genre on that, or, change the setting anywhere you want to, as long as you keep the dynamic the same. And that's why I think it's really simple to take these stories and translate them from, one cultural genre to another cultural genre. Because at base level, there isn't anything special about them, Like, there's nothing overworldly special about the fact that it's samurai versus cowboys, or this, like, a desert town or a rice village, or, the specific personalities of each individual. Like in Seven Samurai, you've got the stoic older samurai. You've got the younger samurai who hasn't fought in any battles. He hasn't killed any people. He's looking up to these elders. You've got the goofball who doesn't really know, the group doesn't really think he is a samurai, that he's just lying. And then you've got, like, the other comic reliefs, and you've got the other, like really hard-nosed, quiet types, and you've got these archetypes that fall into the different characters, and that can be easily translated to any culture, because at base it's just people. There are people who are timid, and there are people who are stubborn, and there are people who are foolish, and there are people who are very brash. And that doesn't depend on one culture or one setting. That can be translated from, coast to coast to country. And the other film, which is, another translation, is the film Yojimbo and Sanjuro by Akira Kurosawa. And these also share that same dynamic of characters and the general dynamic of the plot. It doesn't really matter where they are, as long as you keep kind of the same feeling between, adaptations. So in Yojimbo and Sanjuro, Toshiro Mifune, who is a prolific actor in Japan, he plays this Ronin who just goes into this town. In the first one, he goes into this town that's being ripped apart by these battling Yakuza groups, and he kind of puts his foot in the middle of it and causes problems for each side and everything. And he's just doing it for money, because he's hungry, he's poor, and he's good with a sword, and he's just kind of like an anti-hero, in normal or in more contemporary verbiage. And he goes about, joining each side and pitting them against each other to try and stop them from fighting. So, and getting paid from each side. He's playing both sides so he can win ultimately. But he's also got this kind of, we talked last time about honor and culture in Japan, and how he's still a samurai. I mean, he's a Ronin, which means he doesn't have a lord that he works for and protects, but he still embodies those core principles of a samurai in Bushido, which is, honor and integrity and civility and all these sorts of things. And he's also highly skilled, and he's using those skills to pit these Yakuza against each other to, ultimately help the town, because he befriends a merchant in the town and talks about how things have gotten so bad that, the only business that's thriving is the guy who makes coffins. And that character is actually in there a few times where, these fights will break out between these two opposing Yakuza clans, and, it'll leave like 4 dead bodies, and they've got to pay for, the burying and the getting rid of the bodies. So the only guy who's making any money is the guy who, makes the coffins. And the guy who runs the shop, it's like a rice shop or like a little restaurant or whatever. He's like, yeah, man, if they would just get the hell out of here, things could get back to the way they were before they showed up, And the title character, he's unnamed. Yojimbo is a Japanese word for like security guard or guard. It's not really his name. And he's like, yeah, sure, I'll get rid of him. Just the guy who runs this little restaurant or whatever, just give me food because I'm kind of hungry, and I'll get rid of him. Let me stay here. I've been on the road for a long time. I don't have a lot of food. I don't have a lot of money. Pay me in food, and I'll deal with it for you. And the guy's skeptical. He's like, yeah, right. You're just one person against these 2 Yakuza clans, and one of the guys has a gun, and you're just foolish. He's like, whatever, I'll play along. Here's a bowl of rice. Go do your thing. And throughout the film, Toshiro's character, he, pits them against each other, and it's this whole thing, and it's a really great character film. Because it's set literally on this one street in this one little village. And then the sequel is kind of more the same. But that was actually the inspiration for a series of films that actually jump-started a pretty well-known American actor's career, Clint Eastwood. And the film The Fistful of Dollars, which is also like in the series of films like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and any of the films with the character of Clint Eastwood's unnamed, wandering guy. And the story isn't, from what I understand, the story isn't that similar, but it's more so the character. The character that Clint Eastwood plays is directly influenced by Toshiro Mifune's character. The wandering guy who has his own set of morals and what he wants and what he needs to survive, and how he's, I'm going to do what I need to do for my survival. And you can see that it's not so much the plot that's translated over. It's more so the character. And I want to talk about that in general, is that character archetypes aren't unique to any one culture. In storytelling, they're pretty universal. The hero, the villain, the master, the elder, the fool, these sorts of things. These are just character archetypes that characters in films and stories and everything they fill, so that the people who are ingesting the medium can directly point out who's who, what role, quote unquote, role they play in that piece of art. And it's easy once you think about it in those terms, and not necessarily like, oh, it's a Japanese thing, you can't redo a Japanese thing, it's because it's their culture. If you break it down into its pieces, you can see that it's easily transmittable from one culture to another, because it's just storytelling. And, like I said last time, each genre, Western and the samurai film, they played off each other in this time period. from early filmmaking in the early 1900s to the the 70s, when everything started to die down a little bit. John Ford, who did The Grapes of Wrath and things like that, Akira Kurosawa said that John Ford was one of his inspirations. John Ford is a well-known Western or early film director. So we can see that despite the fact that, like I talked about before, the historical differences are stark, the settings are stark, what's really similar between them is their characters, is their stories, is the human element, which is, that doesn't depend on where you are in the world. And the little details will be different, like the names of the relationships between rulers and the ruled, or how the governments are, or names for things, or traditions, and things like that will be different. Like I talked about honor last time in relation to Japanese culture, how it's a very strong part of their milieu, the way that they think, the way that they act. They're a very honor, centric culture. A lot of Asian cultures are like that. Where in America, like, honor is a thing that's more tied to the military. But, people, like, interpersonal relationships, you don't really talk about honor. It's more about honesty and integrity. That's more of, it's more of a perceived, personal thing. Being honest to another person, having integrity and in interrelationships, which is, that is also a part of Japanese cinema and culture, not just cinema. So we might need to tweak a little bit when it comes to those cultural differences, but in the larger scope, it's not hard to translate. And that's kind of what I wanted to end on, is that despite the fact that, the Jidaigeki films are generally, it's like this 200-year span of, history and culture in Japan, and how the Western is really more of like 80, maybe 100 years, maybe less, of American culture and history, that the settings are different, but the stories that are told can be the same. They can be similar. The morals that we want to take out of them can be similar. The human struggles are similar, because despite the cultural differences, we're all still people. And I've thought about this relationship between, and I think I talked about this before in the first part, the strange relationship between the samurai film and the Western. And it's because, like I was talking about in the first part, both cultures were having some sort of reckoning with their present and their past, and they kind of wanted to distill some sort of strength from their past, whether it be because of the loss of the war, because this is mostly post-war era America and post-war era Japan, trying to look back into the past and distill some strength and some unity, national unity, through these character archetypes and through these stories and through these settings. And that's part of it. I mean, also there's also the part of it where they're just entertaining. There's a lot of action to be had in a Western, like shoot 'em up, or a samurai brawl film. It's hack and slash, and there's death, and there's destruction, and it's just exciting, and it's titillating. But there's also that deeper aspect about the films that do tell a story, because there's a lot of films, no matter the genre, no matter the time frame, where it's just action and bombardment and and just trying to wow the viewer, and they're not really trying to tell a story or to make people think. But I think that these two genres, for their respective cultures, did do something for them. And that need has kind of died off. And we talked last time about how there was this 20-year span for both genres where they were booming. You know, they dominated the TV airwaves. They dominated the film industry. They were just dominating. Other stuff was being made, obviously. You know, I'm not going to deny that. That's, you know, they didn't completely push out every genre or anything like that, but they had a huge market share. And I think the big part of that was the reconciliation, the reckoning, the wishing for some past, some nostalgia, you know, that sort of thing. And, you know, there are still samurai films that get made. There are still some westerns that get made. Mostly remakes from what I've seen, at least when it comes to westerns, which is less to me about the need for some sort of moral center, which is what that one article that I spoke of last time said. It's more of just trying to relive the nostalgia of the nostalgia. You know, it's like this layer cake of nostalgia where you just keep repeating. You're remaking it because it was popular, not because it had some sort of inner morality or, you know, anything like that. But, you know, like I was saying before I started breaking down these two films and like their Western impact, that the samurai film, Japanese cinema in general, has influenced a lot of American cinema, which we can talk about more in the future. But it's not direct. It's not exclusive to the Western. I just think that there's a strong correlation between those two, and I think that I've maybe scratch the surface a little on that. I know there's probably plenty more YouTube videos out there about this topic and everything like that, so I'm not trying to say I'm any expert or anything. It's just me thinking about this stuff out loud and everything. So if you guys have any questions or you want to discuss or anything like that, leave a comment or, you know, hit me up on Facebook or whatever. And we can talk about it a little more, because this is definitely a topic that's very wide spanning and everything like that. Next time, though, I do want to talk about something else, and it is in relation to what we've started to talk about now, slightly. It is about something new. So I just picked up Ghost of Tsushima yesterday or the day before, whenever this gets posted, when it came out. And this is a samurai game. It's not the first one. It's not the last one. But this, I've been thinking about this in relation to video games in history. So this will be the next topic I think I want to talk about in relation to these cultural things and the influence they have on our lives. So if you guys, like I said, if you guys have any other questions or you want to discuss more about this, the Western and the samurai film cultural divide and congruity, let me know. We will start a discussion. But that's the end of this one. See you guys next time.